The six faces of evil Carl Jung discovered in everyday people. What if I told you that evil is not some distant, monstrous force lurking in the shadows, but something far closer, something in you, in me, in the warm neighbor who waves every morning, in the teacher who once inspired us, even in the kindest friend? What if Carl Jung was right when he said that evil doesn't just exist in dictators or criminals, but in the ordinary, hidden behind smiles, good intentions, and everyday behavior? This video is not about horror or villains. It's about you. It's about us. And it's about the six faces of evil that Jung saw, not in fairy tales, but in real life, in society, and in the unconscious mind of every human being. This is going to be uncomfortable. But if you stay with me, I promise it could change the way you see everyone around you, including yourself. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychological thinkers in history, didn't believe evil was something out there. He believed it was within us. Every time we refuse to confront our own darkness, our fears, our envy, our capacity for cruelty, we feed what he called the shadow. Not because we're bad, but because we're human. We all carry a shadow, and when that shadow is denied, it becomes dangerous. It leaks into our actions, into our judgments, into the roles we play in society. But Jung also believed that if we could learn to see the shadow clearly, we could transform it. And that's what this is about. Because evil, for Jung, wasn't just about actions, it was about unawareness. Evil was the absence of inner confrontation. So let's start confronting. The first face of evil Jung saw in everyday people is the smiling mask. This is the face we see most often. It's the person who appears good, kind, moral, maybe even saintly, but uses their goodness as a shield for control. They are nice not because they care, but because niceness gives them power. They never get angry because anger would make them vulnerable. They never criticize because they've mastered the art of passive aggression. When they never admit fault because their identity depends on appearing flawless. But under the surface, there's resentment, manipulation, and emotional dishonesty. Have you ever met someone who always seems good, but leaves you feeling guilty, small, or subtly controlled? That's the smiling mask. And here's the twist. Many of us wear it, not to deceive, but to survive. We learn to be liked instead of being real. But the longer we wear it, the more we lose contact with our shadow and the more dangerous it becomes.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
The second face of evil is the martyr. This one is tricky because it looks like love. Martyrs sacrifice, give, endure suffering. But beneath that sacrifice is often a hidden demand. You owe me. The martyr uses suffering as currency. Their pain becomes a weapon. They won't say it out loud, but their unspoken message is clear. Look how much I've done for you. Look how much I've suffered. Now give me your loyalty, your guilt, your obedience. They don't ask for power directly, they earn it through pity. But it's still power, and it often poisons relationships, creating guilt-based bonds instead of love. Have you ever been with someone who gave so much that you felt like you couldn't leave, couldn't say no, couldn't be honest? That's the martyr's trap. And again, it's not always malicious. Sometimes it's unconscious, but it's still a face of evil when it manipulates, when it binds others through guilt instead of freedom. The third face is the Righteous Avenger. This one disguises itself as justice. It shows up as outrage, as moral superiority, as activism. And to be clear, real justice is sacred. But Jung warned that when we project our own darkness onto others, we start to believe that they are evil and we are pure. And that's when things get dangerous. The Righteous Avenger doesn't just want to correct wrongs, they want revenge. They want to destroy the bad people. They want to punish, humiliate, and silence. And in doing so, they often become the very thing they hate. Jung saw this clearly during the rise of fascism. He saw how crowds convinced themselves they were purging evil while committing atrocities. And today, it still happens. Online, in politics, even in relationships. Have you ever felt the thrill of being right while tearing someone else down? That's the Righteous Avenger, and it's seductive, because moral certainty feels powerful. But when it lacks self-awareness, it becomes a mask for hate. Now pause, reflect. Ask yourself, have I worn any of these faces? Not deliberately, but unconsciously, because that's Jung's entire point. Evil doesn't always look like evil. It looks like virtue, like caring, like fighting for truth. But without shadow work, without inner honesty, our best intentions can become tools of destruction. So where do we go from here? That's what we'll explore in the next part. Because the final three faces are even more subtle, even more common, and one of them may be quietly shaping your life right now. The seduction of control, the three hidden faces of evil that masquerade as strength. If the first three faces of evil Carl Jung identified where moral disguises virtue, sacrifice, and justice, the next three are even more deceptive. They don't appeal to your ethics. They appeal to your power. They don't ask you to be good. They ask you to be strong. They seduce you with control, with certainty, with the illusion of dominance over yourself, over others, over life itself. And the reason they're so dangerous is because they often work, at least for a while. They get results, they gain respect, they make people listen. But beneath their surface is a rot that eats away at your soul and the world around you. These are the faces of evil that look like leadership, confidence, and independence, but in reality, they are built on fear, repression, and emotional violence. And if we don't confront them, they don't just hurt others, they deform us from the inside out. The fourth face of evil Jung warned us about is the mastermind. This is the version of ourselves that seeks to control everything not through force, but through calculation. The mastermind loves efficiency, order, logic, but at its core, it fears the unpredictable nature of the human soul. So it starts to treat people like chess pieces. It uses language as a tool for manipulation, charm as a tool for influence, kindness as a tool for leverage. The mastermind doesn't feel safe unless it's running the show. It often shows up in high achievers, in leaders, in intellectuals. It can look like genius. But what it hides is a deep distrust of vulnerability, a refusal to surrender, and a coldness that slowly turns every relationship into a transaction. Have you ever caught yourself analyzing someone instead of listening to them, calculating your words for effect, rather than speaking from truth? That's the mastermind. And while it can solve problems, it can't love. Because love requires surrender, and the mastermind cannot surrender, not without dying. The fifth face is the stoic tyrant. This one is praised all the time in modern society. Be strong, be unshakable. Don't let emotions control you. And that's not wrong. But the stoic tyrant takes it further. It doesn't just manage emotions, it buries them. It rejects softness, vulnerability, empathy. It sees emotion as weakness, kindness as naivete, compassion as a liability. And in doing so, it becomes emotionally amputated. It becomes hard, cold, proud of its ability to endure, but incapable of intimacy. Jung saw this especially in men raised in rigid cultures, but it applies to anyone who equates control with worth. The stoic tyrant is often admired, even envied, but it lives in a prison of its own making. It avoids pain by avoiding connection. And over time, it either collapses into depression or lashes out in cruelty. Have you ever felt proud of not needing anyone, of not crying, of being the rock for others, while secretly dying inside. That's the stoic tyrant, and it's not strength. It's suppression. The sixth and final face is the isolated God. This is the most subtle, the most seductive, and perhaps the most spiritually dangerous. It appears when someone becomes so disillusioned with the world, so disappointed by people, so exhausted by the games of society, that they retreat not just physically, but psychologically. They stop believing in humanity. They stop connecting. They build a private kingdom in their mind where they are always right, always above, always untouched by the chaos below. The isolated God doesn't seek power over others, it seeks purity through detachment. But in doing so, it becomes cold, nihilistic, and empty. It believes it has transcended the world, but really, it has abandoned it. It is the philosopher who no longer feels, the artist who no longer creates, the seeker who no longer seeks. Have you ever felt superior to others for how detached you are? For how much you see through the world? That's the isolated God. And it may feel like wisdom, but it's really despair wearing a halo. Now ask yourself honestly, do any of these live inside me? Have you ever taken pride in being the smartest one in the room? The most emotionally controlled? The most detached? Because here's the terrifying truth Jung taught. The more unconscious we are of these faces, the more they control us. Evil isn't always loud. It's more often seductive. It makes us feel safe, even admired. But it erodes our humanity while convincing us we've evolved. And here's the deeper question. If these are the 6 faces of evil Jung believed were alive in everyday people, what can we do to confront them? Because now that we've named them, we can't pretend we don't see them. Shadow awakening: how to confront the evil within without losing your soul. So here we are. We've looked into the mirror of Carl Jung's terrifying insight that evil isn't something external to be fought, but something internal to be understood. We've unmasked the 6 faces: the smiling mask, the martyr, the righteous avenger, the mastermind, the stoic tyrant, and the isolated God. They live not in monsters, but in us. But now the real question begins. What do we do with this knowledge? Because seeing the shadow is only the beginning. The real work, the soul work, is in what comes next. And Jung warned, if we confront the shadow without wisdom, without humility, we don't become better, we become consumed. This is where the danger lies. When we first begin to awaken to our own darkness, our first instinct is shame. We recoil, we deny, we rationalize. That's not really me, we say. I was just tired, stressed, pushed too far. But Jung would tell you, no, that's exactly you. That's the part of you that's been waiting to be seen. And your job is not to bury it deeper, but to bring it into the light. Not all at once, not with judgment, but with compassionate honesty. Because the shadow doesn't disappear when you shame it. It disappears when you integrate it. And integration means making peace with your own capacity for destruction without letting it define you. Let's be clear. Confronting the shadow is not about indulging it. It's not about saying, well, I'm selfish and manipulative and cold, so that's just who I am. That's not awakening. That's surrender. True shadow work is the opposite. It's about owning the dark parts of yourself so they stop controlling you from the shadows. It's about recognizing that your anger has a message, that your manipulation is a defense, that your coldness is a wound. And when you see them for what they are, not as moral failures, but as psychic fragments, you begin to reclaim your wholeness. But this process is painful. Because to truly confront the shadow, you must walk into yourself without a map. You must question the stories you've told about who you are. You must admit that much of your strength was actually fear, that much of your morality was actually control, that much of your independence was actually isolation. And in doing so, you'll feel like everything is falling apart. Your identity, your certainty, your sense of being the good one. But don't run from that collapse. That collapse is sacred. That's where the false self dies and the true self begins to emerge. The true self is not perfect. It's not pure. It's not enlightened in the way social media influencers talk about. It's human. It's contradictory. It's messy, but it's real. And that's what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming your full self, light and shadow, without fragmentation. Because when you integrate the shadow, something incredible happens. You don't become darker, you become deeper. You stop reacting, you start responding. You stop projecting, you start perceiving. You stop fearing your darkness and start using it as fuel for growth, creativity, and truth. And that's the paradox at the heart of Jung's philosophy. You become good not by rejecting your evil, but by understanding it. You become whole not by pretending to be only light, but by walking through the dark and carrying what you find back into the world. Because the truth is, the people who have done the deepest shadow work, the people who have faced their own capacity for cruelty, for selfishness, for manipulation, are often the most compassionate people you'll ever meet. Not because they're soft, but because they know what they're capable of. And they've chosen something higher, not from ignorance, but from consciousness. So I want to ask you something uncomfortable. What part of yourself have you never let yourself fully see? What emotion, what thought, what impulse have you pushed so far down that it started to live through your behavior without your permission? And what would happen not if you destroyed it, but if you listened to it? What would it teach you? What truth has your shadow been trying to tell you for years? You see, shadow awakening isn't about becoming someone new. It's about becoming whole. And that wholeness is your birthright. But it's also your responsibility. Because if you don't do your shadow work, someone else pays the price. Your partner, your children, your friends, your community, your world. That's the cost of unconsciousness. And the only way to stop the cycle is to do what most people never will. Look within and not look away. Becoming the lighthouse to use your shadow to heal the world around you. So now we arrive at the final and most vital part of this journey, not just seeing the shadow, not just integrating it, but living differently because of it. This is where philosophy leaves the realm of theory and enters the domain of action. This is where shadow work becomes not just personal therapy, but a moral imperative. Because if we stop with self-awareness and never take responsibility for how we show up in the world, we've missed the point entirely. Carl Jung never wanted us to become obsessed with introspection for its own sake. He wanted us to become whole, so that our wholeness could ripple out into the lives we touch. Because once you've faced the darkness in yourself, you become capable of real, radical light. Not the performative kind, not the polished kind, but the kind that heals because it understands suffering from the inside out. The most powerful people you'll ever meet are not the ones who have never been broken. They are the ones who have been shattered by their own shadows and learned how to rebuild themselves not as perfect beings, but as honest ones. They've made peace with their contradictions. They've admitted their flaws. And in doing so, they've become safe for others to be themselves. That's the strange gift of shadow work. It makes you a sanctuary for the world. Because when you're no longer afraid of who you are, you stop needing to control who others are. You can hold space for imperfection without judgment. You can listen without trying to fix. You can love without trying to possess. And all of that begins with the terrifying act of looking at yourself and saying, "Yes, I see this too. And I will not turn away." Here's the profound irony. The more you accept your darkness, the more light you emanate. Not because you're trying to be good, but because you're no longer pretending. You're no longer leaking unconscious pain onto others. You're no longer forcing others to carry the burden of your disowned self. You start to take responsibility for your emotions, for your projections, for your actions. And that responsibility becomes power not over others, but within yourself. You become grounded, clear, fierce, but kind, honest, but compassionate. You become someone others can trust, not because you never make mistakes, but because when you do, you own them. And this is where the healing begins, not just inside you, but in the world around you. Because when you stop acting from your shadow, you stop perpetuating cycles of harm. You stop unconsciously manipulating. You stop punishing others for your own fears. You stop seeking validation through control. And you start becoming a mirror not of perfection, but of truth. You give others permission to confront their own shadows. You model what it means to be real. And in a world addicted to image, that's revolutionary. So let me ask you one last time, what would your life look like if you stopped running from your own darkness? What would change if instead of suppressing it, you used it as fuel for empathy, for creation, for insight, for courage? What kind of relationships would you have? What kind of leader would you be? What kind of legacy would you leave? Because this isn't just about you anymore. This is about every person who will cross your path in this lifetime. Every child who will learn from your example. Every friend who will heal in your presence. Every stranger who will feel seen because you dared to see yourself. You don't need to be perfect to change the world. You only need to be whole. And wholeness includes your shadow. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But I would add, the responsibility of a lifetime is to use that truth to make the world lighter, softer, and more awake. You've seen the 6 faces of evil. They live in all of us. But so does the light that redeems them. So choose to be the kind of person who doesn't just confront the darkness, but transforms it into something sacred. That is the real work. That is the quiet revolution. That is how we become the light.